Good evening. My name is Stacy Lazat, the DMA League Director of Adult Programs here at the Dallas Museum of Art, and I'm happy to welcome you to our program tonight. This talk is the last in a three-part series highlighting the conservation work done on objects featured in 3 of our fall exhibitions. Tonight we're going to learn more about the work of Vincent van Gogh featured in our current exhibition, Van Gogh and the Olive Groves. If you have not seen it, it is on view until February 6th, so we encourage you to come back and take another look if you've already seen it or see it for the first time. And if you were not able to attend our 2 previous talks about the conservation work done on objects featured in the Focus On Henry Ossawa Tanner exhibition and the Slip Zone, a new look at post-war abstraction in the Americas and East Asia exhibition, those are currently on our YouTube channel, so you can view those whenever you'd like. So I have the privilege of introducing our speaker for tonight's talk, Laura Eva Hartman, who is the Paintings Conservator here at the DMA. Laura joined the DMA in October of 2015, and she worked alongside Mark Leonard in establishing the Painting Conservations Department here. Notable projects include the contributions to the Van Gogh and the Olive Groves exhibition that you're going to learn about tonight, as well as the catalog, and the significant treatments for works in the DMA's collection, including Jackson Pollock's Cathedral and Rufino Tamayo's Nude, just to name a couple. Laura has published widely on the new and innovative treatment techniques developed here at the DMA. She received her MS degree from the Winterthur University of Delaware program in art conservation. She has held positions at institutions including the Prado in Madrid, the Mauritshuis Royal Picture Gallery in the Netherlands, and the Yale University of Art Galleries, as well as the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Following her presentation tonight, you'll have the opportunity to ask Laura some questions. And we ask that you wait for one of our team to bring a microphone to you because we are recording this talk to put online later, so that would be helpful. But now, please welcome Laura Hartman to the stage.
Thank you for joining me today, and thank you, Stacy, as always, for your generous introduction and for putting together a series like this. I know it's a lot of hard work, and it's appreciated. This is the last in a 3-part series on recent conservation work at the DMA. Oops, wrong way. Tonight, I want to focus on the conservation efforts undertaken for the Van Gogh and the Olive Groves exhibition co-organized between the Dallas Museum of Art and the Van Gogh Museum. The concept of the exhibition was brought to fruition initially by our own Nicole Myers after she studied the Olive Grove painting at the Nelson Atkins Museum and realized that a comprehensive look at the Olive Grove series had yet to be explored. The exhibition aimed to bring all 15 of the Olive Grove series paintings together for the first time. Although all 15 of the works could not come to Dallas due to some travel restrictions, all were studied and a stunning group was assembled for our exhibition. Oh God. This beautiful curved gallery, which we refer to as the Olive, showcases the beautiful series. If you have not visited the exhibition, I highly urge you to. The project was a Herculean effort from many, many people, and we're very proud of the outcome. And here's the full set. They're breathtaking, as you can see. The series of paintings were created from June through December of 1889, a difficult year for Van Gogh. That year, he admitted himself to the asylum of Saint-Rémy de Provence in the south of France. Upon arrival to Saint-Rémy, Van Gogh was immediately struck by the landscape and wrote to his brother Theo, with particular attention to the olive trees. The series began shortly after his arrival. However, in mid-July, a severe mental health crisis postponed further progress on the series for 6 weeks. He found himself revisiting the subject in November and December of that same year. Van Gogh wrote to Theo in a letter, quote, "The murmur of an olive grove has something very intimate, immensely old about it. It is too beautiful for me to dare paint it or be able to form an idea of it." In spite of this sentiment, he did start painting olive groves, initially through the window of a studio at Saint-Remy and later outside in the groves, creating this exceptional series. This exhibition also opened the opportunity to study all of the paintings from a technical perspective to answer lingering questions about the group, and the results of which are presented in an educational space in the exhibition, which I urge you all to spend time exploring and in the publication, the published catalog. And here are the main research questions posed throughout the project. I'm going to touch on all of these except for the fourth one regarding the letters, because Nicole does a beautiful job with that in the catalog entry, and we do not have time here, unfortunately, to dive into every aspect of the research. I would end up keeping you all night, I promise, but I do recommend you read the catalog. So a research team was put together, including conservators, curators, scientists, which gathered initially in Amsterdam to discuss and plan for the project and look at various olive grove paintings together. After a year dedicated to studying each painting individually, we gathered again in New York to compare our findings. So here we are in New York, geeking out over the amazing Van Gogh paintings at the Metropolitan Museum. And the research team spanned institutions and countries, and I have listed the core group here. We admittedly had so much fun looking at each painting together, but it was also incredibly illuminating as tiny details started to emerge that pieced each painting together and painted a clear picture of how the works relate to each other. And I was charged with examining the stunning olive trees in the Minneapolis Museum of Art's collection. Many of the research questions remained outlying for this work. The painting depicts a big yellow sun rising over the Alpine Mountains, illuminating the olive groves. The painting beautifully demonstrates Van Gogh's experimentation with synthetism, as Nicole beautifully explains in the catalog. Quote, "That fall, as Van Gogh eased back into painting outdoors, he continued to explore the expressive potential of synthetism, that is, of abstracting color and line from nature to reveal something deeper about the subject," end quote. He was riding the line between painting from nature and abstraction, which is an essential quality of this work. The painting had undergone conservation treatment at some point, and the original canvas support had been lined onto another linen support, and the original stretcher had been replaced, which you see here in this image of the back of the painting as it is today. Some limited archival reports exist that describe an examination that was performed in the 1970s, which interestingly included technical examination and shows the ongoing interest of this work throughout the years. But without much more available archival information, I turned directly to examining the painting. And conservators learn a lot from the backs of paintings, especially looking at the canvas, which unfortunately, as described earlier, was lined onto a secondary canvas support later in its life. While at Saint-Remy, Van Gogh was writing to Theo, his brother, who was sending him materials, including his canvas. As Van Gogh was purchasing his canvas by the meter from larger bolts, it is therefore possible, with the help of amazing engineers and scientists, to puzzle together each individually cut canvas back into the larger roll based on weave pattern. This is done by counting the weave and looking at patterns using x-rays to better visualize the canvas support. So that's what these things that kind of look like heat maps are. And it sounds a little sci-fi, but it really works. And what I'm showing here are the maps based on canvas weave of individual paintings and their location on the canvas roll. Each represents a count from various angles of each individual painting. And so when you put that all together, what you get is each painting's location of where Van Gogh cut on the roll. And this is incredibly helpful in determining which shipment of canvas each painting came from, and can even assist in dating based on letters Van Gogh wrote to Theo about supply shipments. In order to fully sequence, an X-ray is needed, which was not possible in this case. However, looking at small losses from the front of the painting allowed me to take a thread count and get an idea of what type of canvas we were dealing with. I also sampled fibers and learned that they were flax-based. As the canvases came prepared with a ground or gesso preparation, this also aids in assessing which batch of canvas each painting belongs to. In this case, a double ground was present. With all this information, we were able to determine this work likely fell into the October 24th, 1889 shipment that corresponds with letter 815, and therefore helped us more firmly date the work to November of 1889. In some cases, as it was with the Minneapolis picture, Van Gogh began the composition by laying in a limited underdrawing with a dry charcoal medium. Infrared reflectography was used to better image this underdrawing, and that's what's shown here. And here's a detail of the mountain where he seemed to most labor the underdrawing. So you can kind of see it, but when we look at it in IR, it shows that process more clearly. So all of this black are his drawing lines in charcoal. Under the microscope, tiny charcoal particles are also visible. And this detail is from the border where the trees meet the sky and shows the original rounded edges of the tree tops. And again, in IR, it clarifies that. The work was examined in various light sources to understand the paint buildup and process. And here you see an image captured in raking light, which gives us an interesting perspective of the artist's brushwork and even his buildup of paint layers. And especially noteworthy is how comparatively thinly painted the mountains are. UV light can visualize the auto-induced fluorescence of organic materials and some pigments, and can look really psychedelic, like it does here. So again, the mountains and some other areas differed visually to surrounding areas which glow green in this image. And looking closer, it started making sense that there were at least two painting phases in the composition. The first, which includes the mountains, was done in a paint that does not fluoresce green like lead white. And the second, in directional brushstrokes of a paint that does fluoresce green like zinc white, indicating that these were the white paints he was mixing into his other paints in each layer. And we later confirmed it with more analysis, but it was a really good indicator of where these could belong. Oh, and there's the detail. So you can see these green brushstrokes we're using zinc white as opposed to lead white as the mixer. The difference in paint was also especially visible in the center of the sun compared to surrounding sky strokes. The first painting layer done with the lead white and the second zinc white layer had drastically different textures. The lead white mixture at the center of the sun was creamy and smooth, while the zinc white paint had a more paste-like consistency. And again, you can see that in the difference in this photomicrograph. So much smoother than this pasty paint. One especially interesting feature is that the entire mountain range was originally loosely laid in during the first lead white based paint layer, and I've traced that here. And you can see that blue peeking out in this detail of the far right side. So down here. It seems that the mountains were laid in first, then the sky, and the major compositional elements in the mid and foreground were left in reserve initially. A compositional sketch was then laid in with dilute paint and linear brushstrokes. In the case of the tree trunks, this was done in bright red paint. And looking closer, here's that initial red outline. And then he blocks in broader passages of color, which he described to Theo in a letter, quote, "I prepare the thing with sorts of washes with spirits, and then proceed with touches or hatchings of color with spaces between them. This imparts atmosphere and uses less paint." And which is more clearly visible in this detail, Where this initial blocking in is left visible throughout the composition, the actual colors vary depending on each area and even which season. Then final thick brushstrokes are laid in wet into wet, and then some contouring outlines painted directly into the wet paint. His brushwork ranges from directional lines to more fluid swirls depending on the area being painted. At the top, linear strokes of yellows, oranges, blues, and pale greens emanate from the sun and fill the sky. Van Gogh similarly finished the mountains with directional whitish blue and pinkish gray highlights, using mixtures of zinc and now faded organic red lake that give the forms volume. For the foliage, he painted dense clusters of leaves using short, upward curving or swirling brushstrokes and various mixtures of green, blue, red, and yellow, applying both brighter green tones and the same purple and silvery mauve colors used in the first painting session. More chaotic handling, particularly in the tree on the left, the leaves' contrasting tones and values contribute to the painting's overall sense of movement. In stark contrast to the foliage, the tree trunks and branches were painted in long, sinuous strokes of red with yellow highlights and contoured using a very dark blue and possibly ivory black. And I just love these marbled thick brushstrokes he laid in with a loaded brush. I had to stop myself from literally putting millions of these slides into this presentation. Once the painting was dry, at least to the touch, final wet over dry brushstrokes kissed the tops of impasto, most often in deep blue paint in this case, adding final touches and defining contours. And you can see this gumbo effect in this microscopic detail. In order to answer another research question of whether the work was painted en plein air or in the studio, I looked closely at the surface, where many inclusions were found, such as potentially hair impressions, impressions of debris, various debris impressed wet into when the paint was wet, and most excitingly seeds. And I like to joke with Nikki that this could even be an olive seed, but we don't know. We can't know. There was even straw or grass. So this confirmed that the second paint phase was at least painted outdoors. I also found some fingerprints, which I always love because they humanize a work and literally show the hand of the artist. So I want to shift and discuss the last of the questions regarding potential color fading, an effect noticed in other Van Gogh paintings. Van Gogh remarked to Theo in a letter from Saint Remy in September, quote, "The olive trees are very characteristic, and I'm struggling to capture that. It's silver, sometimes more blue, sometimes greenish, bronze, whitening on the ground that is yellow, pink, purplish, or orangish to dull red ochre," end quote. Van Gogh was clearly concerned about portraying color to best emphasize features of the olive groves. Although the olive trees, there's the quote. Although the olive trees look vibrant today, several brushstrokes show indications of potential color change due to the fading of light-sensitive organic red lake pigments. Upon magnification, the light blue paint used to contour the mountains and light blue strokes in the foregrounds appear significantly redder in areas that are hidden underneath thick brushstrokes or where the tops of thick brushstrokes have flaked, like here. So there's a tiny little flake showing that violet underneath. It is likely that these passages were originally a vivid violet-purple hue, and discoloration is particularly noticeable within cracks, where bright pink flashes are seen. And it's very clear in these extreme details, and you can see all that red. The brownish mauve tones in the foliage along the edge of the far right tree also bears evidence of red lake fading. Probably once more reddish purple, these mauve tones were produced by mixing reds into a variety of greens throughout the foliage, often wet into wet. The resulting neutral or broken tones of dull greens, grays, mauvey purples likely gave the leaves a more silvery appearance. when paired with the yellow sky, which brings to mind Van Gogh's desire to paint the olive groves, quote, fully in gold or silver. Additionally, some areas in the sky exhibit remnants of purple and pink paint marbled within blue and yellow brushstrokes. To better understand the lost color, we analyzed each pigment used in the paintings, and here's a full list of pigments published in the catalog, indicating which olive grove paintings they were used in. Important to note is that several red pigments known to fade significantly were used in the series, and those are these over here. In order to better understand the layering and pigments used, tiny samples adjacent to pre-existing losses are sometimes utilized. And these small samples are microscopic in size, but give us a huge amount of information. In this case, one of the especially faded looking areas was sampled next to a loss. And when the sample flipped over, it was amazing how bright pink the paint underneath actually was. And the cross-section shows that gradual fading of that beautiful violet color that's now lost. And in detail, you can see those violet paint particles protected by underlying paint. Sometimes the edges of paintings hidden underneath frames can preserve paint color by shielding these borders from light. However, due to the lighting extending the edges, this was not the case in the Minneapolis picture. But I wanted to show you how some samples from other olive groves so you can see just how intense that can be. So this is protected by the frame and it's very pink, and the same with this. And all of these missing red, violet, pink, and purple shades would have greatly affected the overall intended effect of coupling contrasting colors and mixing specific tones. So to quickly summarize the research questions that we answered for the Minneapolis olive trees, the painting could be dated to the fall and likely was one of the first paintings started in November. At least the top painting phase was done en plein air, as evidenced by debris stuck to the surface of the work. And yes, color change was evident, especially in mixtures using the organic red pigments. But this question of what did the painting look like before fading really stuck with us, and Nikki and I decided to take it a step further. Van Gogh had a profound interest and understanding of color theory, and was well familiar with complementary color theory as well as the use of muted tones made by mixing these. An amazing relic that exists is a box of yarn Van Gogh used to visualize how complementary colors intensify each other and play with color mixtures. And it's amazing to imagine the difference these bright tones would have given to the series. So we decided to hypothetically reconstruct a fall and summer painting using the known paints and techniques to get a sense of what these paintings could have looked like prior to fading. We took the data we had gathered, including all of the pigments found in each work, and started putting together materials to identify each pigment and pigment mixtures available. Looking at the preserved edges and cross-sections was particularly helpful and was a first step when we started mixing the tones. And you see here some of the initial tones I played with, mixing, trying to get some of those violets going. And we also made kind of these gradations of various complementary color tones that gave us an indicator of what those dead tones could have looked like and the best matches for our paintings. So I started the project by finding canvas similar to that used by Van Gogh and stretching it. So here you see it stretched. And then I primed it with a similar preparatory layer. We decided to make a fall and summer reconstruction, mixing all of the respective paintings into each season, which we started calling our little Frankenstein Van Goghs. So I will start with the summer one. So we took the information from the Underdrawing studies, and I made limited marks to demarcate just key features like the horizon in charcoal. Like in the fall paintings, where red was used to outline key features, in the summer, works often used a diluted cobalt blue paint, like the image on the left. So you can see my planning, or my quick linear planning phase in that cobalt blue. And then come the blocking in with dilute color passages, which we saw in the fall paintings in more mauve tones, as opposed to the brighter mint tones of the summer paintings, like here. Then building up the thicker directional paint layers and moving through the composition, playing with brush strokes depending on the section of the composition. Final wet into wet strokes, especially in the sky and in contours, happen at the end of the painting phase. So especially all of these brush strokes in the sky and the treetops. And after the painting had time to dry, I applied those final wet over dry brush strokes. So here's the finale, the one on the right. And then we repeated the process for the fall Frankenstein picture, building up the layers step by step, using all the information that we gathered during the study. And voila, here are the two together. The tones are punchy, intense, and the contrasting colors lift each other up. These are displayed in the research section of the exhibition, so you can check those out. I even snuck in some little secrets, just like the grasshopper leg that broke the internet last year. You can see my little guy. I found him. I did not kill him. I also prepared a step-by-step Van Gogh that is on display in the exhibition shown here. Reverse engineering the paintings was revealing. It became immediately clear that it is not easy being Van Gogh. Stepping into his shoes emphasized the true dedication that he had to painting. It also made clear the control he exhibited in each stroke of paint and how profound his vision was all the way through the painting process. Working on these in the depths of a global pandemic especially enforced Van Gogh's strong belief in the consoling power of art. And I hope you all enjoy the exhibition and take time to look really closely at each work and each brushstroke. And thank you for your attention.
So we have time for some questions if anyone has any.
Hello. A quick question. Is there a consensus amongst conservators on how to, I guess, continue to stop the fading? Is there something that can be done, or just yeah.
I wish there was kind of something we could do on the paintings, but the best course of action is limiting the amount of UV. Some people say, a lot of the research says that there's kind of this initial peak of fading that actually happened in Van Gogh's life, and he was aware of the fading, and he writes about it. But these colors were brand new, and he loved them and was eager to use them. But the best thing we can kind of do to protect what's left is to glaze the works with UV protected glass. And really limit light exposure and UV. So you'll notice in the exhibition they all have this glazing. Yeah.
I'm curious if there was any structural conservation work that had to be done on any of the paintings.
A few of them went through. One of them was taken off the stretcher, and I think it's one of the ones that remained online. But you know, a lot of them have been lined in the past, and several of them were cleaned, which was really exciting. A lot of times exhibitions give us the opportunity to kind of take things into the studio. So that was fabulous to see them all in the studio being cleaned. But I think only one of them had structural work done.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. I am really ignorant about all this stuff. Is there enough lead in lead white paint to give people lead poisoning?
Only if you lick it.
Well, you know, you get paint on your hands.
Yeah, there definitely is if you eat it. It's bad stuff. It's the same lead paint that was on house walls back in the day. But the funny thing is, it's probably not the most dangerous of the pigments that are on these paintings. So there were arsenic-based pigments, mercury-based pigments, so some pretty nasty stuff that you didn't want to eat or drink.
Thank you very much. I was wondering, are you keeping track of the fading in your paintings to also have this comparison and how fast it could have been for Van Gogh?
There are a lot of institutions, so that requires some pretty specialized equipment, but several of the institutions that have the equipment are keeping track and kind of monitoring, which is where a lot of the data came from the earlier question, where they kind of cataloged a peak at the beginning and then a leveling out. But I know a lot of institutions are kind of keeping track. Here at the DMA, when I started, and you know, a lot of people weren't happy about it, but I put a lot of impressionist paintings behind glass just to kind of give them that extra layer of protection.
All right, well, thank you, Laura. We appreciate it.
Thank you.